So our next speaker, most of what we do, we're having panels, but for this we chose actually just one person knowing Justin and his insights. And so you may have looked at the agenda and said, why are you actually having a discussion on legal and a legal framework? It sounds so sexy. But it's important because with any big 5-year plan, the devil is in the details. We want to make sure that foreign investors in particular understand with all of these new growth goals, with all of the ambitions, that the legal framework is being enhanced to match with all of the goals and the ambitions. So we've asked Justin Gisz to come up and join us from Asia Counsel. He's been a practicing lawyer in Vietnam for nearly 20 years, been an attorney for over 30 years, and he's going to provide some insights on the existing legal framework and where we see it going. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you very much, everyone, for inviting me along to speak to you this afternoon. As Eric mentioned, my name is Justin Gisz. I'm a lawyer. I'm going to keep this introduction brief because you didn't come here this afternoon to hear about me, but I'd just like to let you know that I'm a partner of Asia Counsel and Kinstellar Southeast Asia, and pretty soon, as Eric mentioned, it'll be 20 years that I have been living and practicing law in Vietnam. It's been a busy 20 years, thanks in no small part to VinaCapital. Practicing law in Vietnam is many things. It's exciting, it's challenging, it's rewarding, and it is most certainly never, ever boring. A brief snapshot now to compare the Vietnam in which I first arrived 20 years ago and the Vietnam that you see around you today. The written law, vastly superior. It's clearer, it's more detailed, it is far less ambiguous. Transparency, hugely improved. Vietnam's Transparency International ranking is far higher now as compared with 20 years ago. Transparency exposures are far lower than they were 20 years ago, and there is no doubt in my mind that they will continue to reduce with time. Bureaucratic efficiency, leaps and bounds. Compared to 20 years ago, investing requires, in my estimation, less than half of the number of approvals, and they take less than half of the amount of time to process. Nowadays, the bureaucrats know what they're doing, and they're getting better and better all the time. Dispute resolution, chalk and cheese. Rates of successful recognition and enforcement of foreign arbitral awards have risen from about 40% back 20 years ago to around 80% today. Domestic arbitration, also vastly improved. The Vietnam International Arbitration Centre has progressed well beyond credible and entered into sophisticated and robust territory, although the ability to apply to the courts to set aside its awards remains something of a thorn in its side. Foreign exchange control, night and day. The system is, of course, still tightly controlled by the State Bank of Vietnam, and the VND is, of course, not yet freely tradable. However, the pathways for foreign currency inflows into Vietnam are much clearer, and the system for currency outflows is far more flexible and effective as compared with the situation 20 years ago. Foreign ownership restrictions, they still exist, of course, but many have been abolished or reduced. 100% majority ownership, 100% or majority foreign ownership is now permitted across a wide range of industry sectors. The default cap for public companies remains at 50%, although this is subject to exceptions and variables. 20 years ago, Vietnam had not yet even joined the WTO, and restrictions were very tight across most key industry sectors. Securities regulation, much better, much clearer, more detailed, more consistent, more sophisticated, and more on that in a few minutes. Land and real estate, absolutely getting there. I've rarely been more mystified than I was 20 years ago when trying to decipher Vietnam's land laws, but that's changed. In parallel, with the marked improvements of the regulatory framework. Technology and digitalisation are transforming the legal landscape in Vietnam at an ever-increasing pace. 20 years ago, you'd struggle to find a restaurant who'd accept your credit card. All of that said, there is still much work to be done. Vietnam cannot rest on its laurels of its remarkable achievements from the last 20 years. Vietnam must look forward to the next 20 years and beyond. Vietnam's leaders realise this and are taking decisive action to turn their ambitions into reality. As you heard from His Excellency, earlier this year, Vietnam's Central Politburo issued 4 key policy resolutions which have come to be known as the pillars of an integrated policy framework. And you have already heard about the key objectives of those 4 pillars of those key resolutions. As you would expect, I'd like to focus on Resolution 66, which deals with legal reforms, one of those pillars. Resolution 66 includes, amongst its key initiatives, for the legal system to be more responsive and forward-looking, for enforcement of rights and interests to be strict, fair, and based on legal and factual substance, for the legal mindset in Vietnam to change fundamentally to enhance transparency, stability, and predictability, and for digital transformation to be placed front and centre of the legal systemic development. These are worthy goals indeed. What then is the Vietnamese government doing in order to realise these high-level policy objectives? You've already heard mention today during the conference of the administrative streamlining that has been undertaken over the last 12 months. The governmental and bureaucratic structures of Vietnam have undergone profound changes in the last 12 months. As you've heard earlier, 63 provinces have been consolidated to become 34. 18 ministries have become 14. 3 government tiers have become 2. This is also happening at judicial level. Within the judiciary, there was previously a 4-tier court structure that has been reduced to 3 tiers. 700 district courts have been reduced to 355 regional courts. 64 provincial courts have been reduced to 34. Now, inevitably, there have been some teething problems in implementing such an ambitious restructuring project. These, however, have for the most part settled down. In my view, from where I sit as a transactional lawyer in Vietnam, the future of administrative efficiency in Vietnam looks very, very bright. You've already heard mention this morning of the recent upgrade that FTSE Russell recently implemented, elevating Vietnam's status from frontier market to secondary emerging market with effect from September 2026. This long-awaited and arguably well overdue development is evidence of the progress which has been made in the area of securities regulation in Vietnam. Key amongst the regulatory developments which drove FTSE Russell's decision was the introduction in September 2024 of a non-pre-funding model which removed, for foreign institutional investors, the mandatory requirement for full pre-funding of all trades of public securities. Failed trade handling issues have been addressed by new regulations, which was also central to FTSE Russell's market upgrade decision. Securities trading account opening and administration procedures have also been streamlined and simplified, thereby enhancing accessibility of the trading system for foreign investors. These and other key advancements have been made possible by Vietnam's adoption and rollout of a new KRX-provided trading, clearance and settlement platform. The State Securities Commission has also announced a roadmap for and issued legislation to underpin the adoption of a central counterparty system by 2027, which will further enhance the efficiency, robustness and safety of Vietnam's securities trading system. This, following on from the emerging market upgrade, will undoubtedly provide another huge boost in international appetite for Vietnam's public capital markets. Tax reforms. Happily, no change is proposed in relation to the existing tax regime which applies to sales of public securities, which is set to remain at 0.1% of sale consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, long may it continue. As for sales of non-public shares or capital interests by non-resident companies, the winds of change are blowing. Capital gains tax has previously been payable by non-resident corporate sellers at the rate of 20% of gain. This is set to change to tax at a percentage of consideration, which is expected to be 2%. These and other key tax reforms, once finalised, will create a clearer, fairer, and more attractive tax landscape for companies and funds considering private equity investments in Vietnam. Digital transformation. On the digital front, it is abundantly clear that the Vietnamese government is very serious about the digitalisation of the Vietnamese nation and economy. There is ample evidence of this on the legal front. The new personal data protection law is going live in January 2026 and will represent the culmination of years of Vietnam's development and progress in data protection regulation. This prospective data protection regulatory regime in Vietnam is of an international standard of clarity and robustness and compares favourably with the corresponding PDP regimes of many comparable jurisdictions worldwide. Electronic identification, transactions, signatures and contracting are moving forward at a steady pace. For example, the QR code point of sale and VND transfer system in Vietnam is incredibly smooth, fast and efficient and has been universally adopted throughout the market. Digital transformation is well on the way to removing a great deal of paper-based process burden from life, investment and business in Vietnam. Have we seen the end of wet ink signatures and physical seals on contracts? Sadly, no. But with any sort of luck, it's only just around the corner now. Data centre development is also right on the cusp of taking off in Vietnam. Recent overhaul of Vietnam's telecommunications regulatory framework has given us a clear and robust legal platform for the development and operation of data centres in Vietnam, although, as you heard from Don earlier, some improvements are still required. Private sector investment is already happening in the data centre sector, and capital sources are lining up to grasp investment opportunities as they become available. Cryptocurrency has finally been recognised by Vietnam law. In June this year, a new law on digital technology industry was passed by the National Assembly. This new law, which comes into force on 1 January 2026, legally recognised the concepts of crypto assets and other kinds of virtual assets for the first time and establishes a legal platform for their future regulation. In September this year, the government issued a resolution which sets the platform for a 5-year pilot program for a regulated crypto market in Vietnam. Turning now to land and real estate. Although progress could arguably be faster, there has recently been a number of positive developments in Vietnam's land and real estate business laws. Amongst the most significant of these recent reforms is a new market-based regime for land pricing and compensation, which has replaced the legacy state-fixed pricing table system. This significant change is designed to reduce distortions, improve transparency, and more evenly balance the interests of the state, land users, and investors. On the energy side, I don't have nearly enough time to tackle the myriad developments which have occurred within the power generation space during the last 2 years. I'll summarise it this way. The government's long-awaited Power Development Plan 8 has been issued, launched, amended and supplemented, and a raft of legislation has been issued under it. As a result, we now have a much clearer and more detailed and robust regulatory platform within which Vietnam's energy sector can further develop into the long-term future. The government is undoubtedly committed to fostering a modern, versatile and attractive environment for investing in energy projects in Vietnam, particularly in the renewable space. Finally, I'd like to touch on the international financial centres. You heard His Excellency mention them a few moments ago. Work is underway in earnest in making these ambitious projects a reality. When they inevitably do take shape, the results will be a game changer for Vietnam. These IFCs, one in Ho Chi Minh City and one in Da Nang, will provide highly attractive, comprehensive financial hubs for businesses operating in capital markets, asset and funds management, banking, insurance, commodities trading, fintech, innovation, and professional services. The advantages of operating within the IFCs will be many, varied, and highly significant, and you already will have heard much about them, I'm sure. To conclude my presentation today, I'd like to focus on the new arbitration jurisdiction, which is set to be created as part of the IFC initiative. The IFC Arbitration Centre is planned to have broad jurisdiction to determine disputes not only between IFC members, but between IFC members and non-members. Now, of particular interest to me is the fact that the IFC Arbitration Centre will expressly allow parties to waive their rights to apply to the courts to have arbitral awards set aside. This ability to have disputes determined quickly and efficiently by arbitration in circumstances where binding and effective waiver of court appeal rights is possible presents an exciting and hugely welcome prospect. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes my 15 minutes, and thank you very much for your time and attention. If you do have any questions that you'd like to ask, I will be at the dinner this evening, so please don't hesitate to tap me on the shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.